Okay, so get this. There's this idea floating around that in a world where Trump won the 2024 election against Kamala Harris, that Biden should resign.
Interesting.
It sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
But it's out there. And people are actually talking about it.
Wow.
Like, what if Biden stepped down and Harris became president just for like the last month of his term?
Just for a month.
Yeah. Wild, right?
It's definitely a thought-provoking scenario.
It is.
Yeah.
And it gets you thinking about like, all these different things about power and strategy and the future of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
So today we're diving deep into this whole idea.
Okay.
I've got articles, social media posts,
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff.
Interesting.
And we're going to break it all down.
Great.
We'll look at why someone would even suggest this,
Okay.
how people reacted, and what it all might say about the state of American politics.
I'm intrigued.
And hey, if this kind of deep dive is your thing, hit that subscribe button.
Right.
You won't want to miss our future episodes.
Good idea.
Okay, so before we get into the details,
Sure.
we got to remember, we're in like a hypothetical world here. The stuff we're looking at,
Yeah.
it all starts with this idea that Trump won in 2024.
Okay.
That's like the foundation for this whole resignation thing.
Gotcha.
It's key to understanding why this suggestion even came up.
Makes sense.
So let's talk about the suggestion itself.
Right.
Jamal Simmons.
I know that name.
You know him.
Yeah. He was the former communications director for Vice President Harris.
Right.
Yeah.
So he went on CNN
Oh, wow.
and actually said that Biden should just step down.
Really?
Yeah.
He said that publicly.
Publicly?
Wow.
And let Harris be president for the last 30 days.
Bold move.
Right.
Yeah.
So the question is,
I'm listening.
why would he suggest something so drastic?
Yeah. What was his thinking there?
Well, what's interesting is Simmons presented it as a strategic move,
Oh, okay.
like a way to help the Democrats.
Interesting.
He argued it would make Harris look decisive, create some buzz, and maybe even shift how people see the party after a loss.
Okay. So like a way to bounce back.
Yeah, like a reset button.
Interesting tactic.
It's bold for sure.
It is.
And it definitely sparked a lot of debate.
I bet. Yeah. And that's where you see the social media reactions coming in.
Right.
Some people were really into this idea. They saw it as a way to kind of flip the script on Trump.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with that whole Trump 47 merchandise thing. It's almost like they wanted to use his own branding against him.
Yeah, I get that. Like a political judo move.
Exactly.
It would definitely appeal to those who want to push back.
Right.
Especially after a tough election.
For sure.
But not everyone was on board, right?
Oh, definitely not.
Okay.
There was a lot of pushback.
What were they saying?
Some folks thought it would be disrespectful to Biden.
I can see that.
And some were worried about the precedent it would set.
Like undermining the peaceful transfer of power.
Exactly.
So it seems like this idea really hit a nerve.
It did.
Exposed some real divisions, not just within the Democratic Party,
Right.
but in the country as a whole.
Definitely.
But let's step back for a second.
Okay.
Think bigger picture.
Yeah.
Beyond the immediate reactions, what are the implications of even considering a move like this?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
This scenario kind of forces us to confront some anxieties.
Anxieties about what?
About presidential succession.
Interesting.
It really highlights how fragile power can be and how easily things could be disrupted.
Even in a system designed for stability.
Exactly.
So we're not just talking about Biden or Harris here.
Right.
It's bigger than that.
It's about the system itself.
And how we handle those transitions.
And the uncertainties that come with them.
So you're saying this whole situation is like a stress test.
I like that.
For our institutions.
You could say that.
It reveals those pressure points where things could potentially break down.
Absolutely.
Now let's shift gears a bit
Okay.
and focus on Biden and Harris themselves
Sure.
in this alternate timeline where Trump wins.
Right.
How would resignation affect Biden's legacy?
That's a great question.
There are a couple ways to look at it, right?
Yeah, there are definitely different perspectives.
On the one hand,
Yeah.
it could be seen as selfless.
Like putting the party first.
Right.
Ahead of his own ego.
And potentially even helping with the transition.
Exactly.
Maybe he'd even get some praise for stepping aside gracefully.
It's possible.
But there's always another side of the coin.
Right, of course.
How else could it be perceived?
Some might see it as an admission of defeat.
Like giving up.
Yeah.
Or a sign of weakness.
Maybe even a dereliction of duty.
So it's a risky move.
It is.
At risk.
But also potentially high reward.
And how people ultimately view it? It depends on a lot of things.
How it's communicated, for one.
Okay.
And how the public reacts.
Makes sense. Now, what about Harris? How could this impact her future in politics?
It's complicated.
In what way?
Well, it's a double-edged sword for her.
Okay, I see.
On one hand, she'd get to be president.
Even if it's just for a short time.
Right.
That could boost her profile.
Definitely.
Give her valuable experience.
For sure.
But she'd be inheriting a tough situation.
Absolutely.
Divided country, challenging political landscape.
Yes.
And the shadow of that recent election loss. So basically, thrust into the spotlight.
Right.
With not a lot of time to make a real impact.
Exactly.
And let's not forget the historical significance.
Oh, absolutely.
First female president.
Even if it's just for a short time.
Still a huge milestone.
It is.
That comes with a lot of pressure and scrutiny.
Immense pressure.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential consequences for both Biden and Harris. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
The symbolic weight of all this.
Right.
What are the broader implications of even entertaining this idea?
Well, it forces us to confront those unspoken anxieties.
The ones we talked about before.
Exactly.
About presidential succession.
Yes.
Okay.
It highlights the fragility of power.
And the potential for disruption.
Even in a system that's designed for stability.
So it's not just about the individuals. It's about the system itself.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a really interesting point.
It makes you think about those mechanisms.
The ones in place for a peaceful transfer of power.
Yes.
And about those potential vulnerabilities. And how important it is to uphold those democratic norms.
Even when things get tough.
It also makes you think about how people perceive presidential authority.
Right.
And what makes it seem legitimate.
Especially in a divided political landscape.
So basically, this hypothetical scenario, it's like a stress test.
You could say that.
For democratic institutions.
It exposes those pressure points.
The areas where things could potentially go wrong.
Exactly.
And it emphasizes how important it is to be vigilant.
Absolutely.
In protecting our democracy.
Couldn't agree more.
It's like we're putting our system under a microscope.
And seeing what happens when the pressure's on.
Exactly.
It reveals those underlying tensions.
And those potential triggers.
That could disrupt the status quo.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
But an important one.
Absolutely.
We can't afford to take our democratic institutions for granted.
We can't assume they're immune to challenges.
This whole discussion.
Yeah.
It really highlights the need for informed civic engagement.
And critical thinking.
And a willingness to wrestle with these complex issues.
Even if they are just hypothetical scenarios.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here today.
We have.
Explored this controversial suggestion.
The reaction.
And the potential consequences.
For both Biden and Harris.
And for the country as a whole.
Right.
But we're not done yet.
Oh.
We've got one more part to this deep dive.
Okay.
And you won't want to miss it.
I'm intrigued.
We'll be back.
Great.
To wrap things up.
Okay.
And leave you with some final thoughts to ponder. All right, so we're back. And we've been talking about this hypothetical scenario where Trump wins in 2024.
Right.
And Biden ends up resigning, leaving Harris to take over for the last month of his term.
A wild scenario.
It is.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up,
Sure.
I want to touch on something we haven't really discussed yet.
Okay.
Let's say Biden actually does resign. What could Harris actually do in that short amount of time?
That's a great point.
30 days isn't much.
Not at all.
Leave your mark on the presidency.
True, but she could still make some moves.
Like what?
Some symbolic gestures.
Okay.
Or policy pronouncements.
That would signal her priorities.
Exactly.
And kind of set the stage for the next administration.
Yeah.
Give me some examples.
Well, she could issue executive orders.
Oh, like on what?
Things like climate change.
Okay.
Or criminal justice reform. They wouldn't have a lasting impact.
Because of the limited time.
Right.
But they'd send a message.
Exactly.
About her values.
And her vision for the country.
So even if she can't enact major policy changes, she can still use that time to make a statement.
Precisely.
Even if it's more symbolic than substantive.
Right.
Anything else.
She could use her platform to advocate for certain policies.
Okay.
Or call for unity and healing.
Especially in a divided nation like we're imagining.
It's a chance to showcase her leadership style.
And connect with people.
On a more personal level.
It's a lot to pack into 30 days.
It is.
It makes you wonder if the impact would be more about perception.
That's a key part.
More than actual policy changes.
How the public perceives it.
Right.
It's crucial.
Would they see it as strength or weakness?
Exactly.
Would it build confidence or just create more division?
It's hard to say for sure.
It really is fascinating to think about.
It is.
This whole scenario we've been discussing with Trump winning and all that, it just underscores how unpredictable politics can be.
Absolutely.
And how much uncertainty there really is.
It reminds us that history isn't set in stone.
Right.
There are always different paths.
And unexpected consequences.
Exactly.
This whole conversation has been a real eye-opener for me.
Me too.
It's made me think critically about leadership.
And transition.
And the future of our democracy.
It's a lot to consider.
What stands out to you as the biggest takeaway from all this?
I think for me, it's realizing that even small events...
Like a resignation. It can have a ripple effect.
And lead to totally different outcomes.
It encourages us to think about those choices.
The ones that are made.
And the paths that aren't taken.
And how things could have been different.
It makes you realize we're not just watching history unfold.
Right.
We're part of it.
We're shaping it.
That's a powerful thought.
It is.
And that's why these kinds of discussions are so important.
They challenge us to think about the complexities
of politics.
And the consequences of our actions.
Both as individuals and as a society. Well, there you have it, folks. We've taken a deep dive into this fascinating what-if scenario.
Explored the possibility of Biden resigning.
The implications for Harris.
And what it all reveals about the state of American democracy.
It's been a thought-provoking journey.
It has.
And we hope you've enjoyed listening.
I certainly have.
As much as we've enjoyed discussing it.
Absolutely.
But the conversation doesn't have to end here.
Right.
Keep thinking about these ideas.
Share your insights.
Engage in those thoughtful debates.
That's what it's all about.
That's what the deep dive is all about.
Exploring those complex issues.
Challenging those assumptions.
Expanding our understanding of the world.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive
into the world of political hypotheticals,
make sure you hit that subscribe button
so you don't miss out.
We'll be back soon
with another thought-provoking exploration.
Ready to dive deep into a topic that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.
Until then,
keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
And remember,
question everything